how do you prepare for an Oxford admission interview? What have you heard about it? Have you guys done any research in it? And generally, how are you sort of feeling about it?
So we actually had quite a long conversation on the way here about interviews. We have slightly different mindsets on it. For me, I'm way more nervous about the interview than I am the admissions test, because my whole life I've had good experience with tests. I've had, I like the idea of this is what you need to know, learn it and get good in answering questions, and then you'll be okay with the exam. I've always liked that, and I've always been good with that. When it comes to trying to articulate your understanding of a subject to someone asking you questions in a really pressured environment, that's not something I look forward to. So I'm really not looking forward to it in that way. But in terms of preparation, what I've heard is that the best way to prepare is to go through difficult questions. For example, go through a PAT question, an admissions test question, but explain what your thought processes are as you're doing it out loud, because that's how you'll do it in the interview. So occasionally when I do a question that I'm not understanding, or I'm struggling with a question, when I'm at home, when I'm not on the exam, so I can speak out loud, I will try and reason it out, because not only will that help your understanding of the question, because it leads you logically through a process that might get you to the right answer, but it will also be useful in the interview because they want to see your understanding. The more practice you have explaining your subject, the better experience you should have in the interview. So
it's almost like role playing out the process of dealing with a question that someone might give you.
So rather than them asking you a question, just read a question on a piece of paper, then explain to yourself out loud what you would need. So in the limited research that I've done, admittedly, there's the questions for the interviews that they ask you for engineering are very, very abstract. They give you no numbers, no details at all. They just said, how would you do this? And from what my brother has told me, having gone through Oxford himself for physics, he said that they want to test your thought processes is in the sense that they want to see where you'd go with it, what you would need for it, and what you would use that for to get some sort of answer that they're looking for. They're not necessarily looking for the right answer, but they're testing how you think and how you adapt your thinking process to what new information they might give you, because they want to see how you respond to teaching. Another point that I think is important is that make sure you know your personal statement well. If you've written a whole bunch of stuff about a book that you've read or a video that you've watched in your personal statement, and then you don't actually know that well, then they ask you that, you have no idea what to say. They think you're lying probably, or just didn't actually care that much. So
AI wrote it. AI wrote the personal statement.
Yeah. So make sure whatever you write on your personal statement, you are familiar with. Recap it before the interview, especially.
So almost like revise your personal statement. Yeah. No, inside absolutely. Out. And they'll have it in front of them, I'm guessing, and they'll have all. Does anyone know, by the way, how long the interviews are?
I think it's about 20.
For me, it's 40 minutes, I'm pretty sure.
It's a 40-minute interview.
I think they might have multiple, though. I don't actually remember.
Mine is a bit different to how Abdullah's described the engineering one. So, I've done almost zero research because I don't want to let myself get to that stage, because then I feel like I've got an interview, which I obviously have not. So I've kind of just heard from people about what the PPE interview is like. I think for the PPE one, it's kind of critical thinking, and then also, can you defend a stance that you take? So, one of the typical questions which someone told me is, you're the mayor of a town. The town has a massive littering issue. If you made littering, if you put like a fine of death, so you put the death penalty on littering, there would be no littering in that town. Would you do this? So it's really kind of, you have to, so whatever my answer is to it, and I've been thinking about it for ages and I still don't know what I do, but whatever your answer is to it, you've then got to be able to defend it. And I've heard the same. I was talking to someone who had a question in his economics, E&M, so economics and management at Oxford. And his question is, what would you do if there was a time machine?
What would you do if there was a time machine?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the follow-up question is, how would you sell it? So
Interesting.
it's you've got to answer the question, remember that answer, and then defend when they come at you and tell you you're wrong. That's what I understand. And I
there's
think
no right answer as well.
exactly. It's not like they'll say you're wrong because you're not wrong, but they'll introduce something else. So then they'll say, let's say I say, for example, yes, I should have the death penalty. And they'll say, okay, so do you think that the punishment fits the crime if someone drops a bottle and you're killing them? And you've just got to have that kind of confidence to defend it, but then also that mental flexibility to accept different arguments. Opposite to Abdullah, I'm more nervous about the admissions test than the interview because at school I do a lot of kind of speaking stuff. So I'm confident talking to people, and I'm confident I did a mock like Viva in school, and I got like properly grilled by 3 teachers who were just almost all at the same time shouting me, telling me I was wrong. And I felt like I dealt with it, not 100%, obviously I was in year 12, but I think I dealt with it pretty well. And I think if I get to the interview, I'd feel like I've got a decent chance, but I just, getting to the interview that's the hard part.
I would say that for me, a big reason also why I don't like the idea of an interview or not looking forward to it is because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what they'll ask you. You don't know what you actually need to prepare for. That's a big thing. The worst thing, in my opinion, in tests is when they ask you a question that doesn't have a 100% definite, I know I'm right once you answer this question. For example, some years in the PATs, they like to ask these questions. They'll tell you to sketch a graph. And then in the next part, they'll tell you to sketch another graph. And when you sketch a graph, you don't know for sure if that's going to be the right graph that you've sketched, for example, because there's not a number that you need to find. There's not one answer that you use information for to get. You try and use what they've given you to create an image, essentially. And that idea of not knowing whether you're right or not knowing whether you have, essentially not knowing whether you're right is what is the worst part about written tests for me. And similarly, in an interview, not knowing whether they'll ask you this or that and whether you'll be right or wrong is just it's not good.
It's scary.
It's quite scary.
Scary to think about.